This meeting is taking place via Zoom. Public notice of the steps necessary to participate in this evening's meeting were posted on the district website. Mrs. Abear, would you please take roll?
Mrs. Pimer? Mrs. Burton-Kelsey?
Here.
Mr. Harris?
Here.
Mrs. Gadget?
Here.
Here.
Walter?
Mr. Burke, I just want to check in with you. Are you able to unmute for us when needed? All right, Mrs. Abear, thank you for taking roll.
Mark, can you hear me? This is Laura.
Yes, Laura, we can hear
Okay,
you now.
I just never heard my name. I lost sound for a minute. I wanted to make sure
Okay.
I am here.
We have you now.
Okay,
Mrs.
thank you.
Pimer, are you able to unmute yourself?
Mark, I'm here. This is Shannon.
Thank you, Shannon. We got you.
Thank you.
Yep. Just want to check with Mrs. Pimer and Mr. Burke.
Now I'm unmuted.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Burke. If you could keep it on mute until we need you to chime in for us, I'd appreciate it. But great. We hear you loud and clear.
Thank you.
All right. Next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. If we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item C is the approval of the agenda. The suggested motion is to approve the agenda as recommended. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Burke, support by Harris. Any discussion? Hearing none, Mrs. Abear, would you please take a roll call vote?
Mrs. Pimer? Mrs. Burton-Kelsey?
Yes.
Mrs. Gadget?
Yes.
Yes.
All right,
I apologize if I'm stepping on someone's toes, but I'm not hearing things. You can't hear Mrs. Abear, and Mark, sometimes I think you're speaking, but I can't hear you.
okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you right now, yes, but I did
Okay.
not hear the whole roll call.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and lead the roll call then at this point.
Yeah, I never heard my name. This is Laura.
All right, thank you, Laura. So what we're doing, we have a motion by Burke, supported by Harris, to approve the agenda for this evening's meeting. I will take a roll call vote. Mrs. Pimer,
Yes.
Mrs. Burton Kelsey,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mrs. Paget,
Yes.
Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer Perry,
Yes.
and Mrs. Berry.
Yes.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Item number 2 on the agenda, after approval of the agenda, is hearing of the public. This is for items listed on the agenda, including the reaffirmation of the district's continuity of learning plan. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes. And if you would like to comment at this time, please raise your hand in Zoom. And when called upon, we will ask that you state and spell your name. Okay. Is that Kevin's iPhone? All right, we see a Kevin's iPhone. Sir, you have the floor. If you could just state your full name for us and your address.
Yes, it's Kevin Owens, 23828 Foxmore Boulevard, Woodhaven, Michigan.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right, you can proceed with your comments.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. At this time, I would just like to understand why it is that during these unprecedented times that we are allowing us to put our children back into the K-8 learning program. I just feel at this point that it's definitely socially irresponsible. I mean, as parents, we have kept our children from contact with others since the rollout of the newest educational model that was being implemented November 18th to December 8th, and do not feel that it's really in the best interest of our families, our educators, and those in the community to send our children for a mere 4 days of face-to-face learning to potentially expose them to this virus. In our household, education is definitely the utmost importance, but only behind our kids' safety. And it's disheartening at this point to think that the Woodhaven Brownstown School Board feel that 4 days of class before the holiday break is worth the potential risk and disruption created in the continuity of providing equal opportunity to educator-led instruction, assuring that no kid is left behind, which is what this current model is doing that we've been implementing the last couple of weeks. I mean, we are being advised by our governor not to gather during Christmas, yet the Woodhaven School Board wants us to send our kids to school. I can't believe that this vote was taken. From my understandings, this was something that was done at a meeting in August. To quote, the vote to return face-to-face was made in an open meeting in August. Our return to school plan says that we will offer face-to-face remote options as long as we are in phase 4. Because of that, because that's what the parents asked for. Adjustments are made based on current requirements by the governor or health department, but an adjustment doesn't require a new board vote if it follows what we outlined in the original plan. Is that correct?
I don't have it in front of me, so it's something I can't tell you definitively is correct right now.
Well, in the families and other members of the community I've spoken with, this was a decision that was made back in August when we weren't seeing the rates that we are today. And also not realizing that face-to-face meant go to class 2 days and teach yourself for the other 3. It makes me wonder definitely why the shutdown took place in November, as that wasn't required by the governor or the health department. So why are we now disrupting the current model where all children are getting access to an equal educational opportunity? For a mere 4 face-to-face touch points before the holiday break, is it really worth considering what's happening in our community and the potential long-term implications? At last I looked, in suburban Wayne County, excluding Detroit, as of today, there were 839 new cases, leading all counties in Michigan. On Friday, we were nearing 16% positivity rates and over 70,000 patients. That's the highest rate since April, and that was only 7,000 tests administered. In Michigan, children 0 to 19 years of age make up 25% of our population. Why are we exposing that 25%, considering that 13% of these children ages 0 to 19 represent the COVID cases? And are we really looking at the long-term complications? Not to mention, the educational impact that part-time schools having on those of us who chose face-to-face learning. But also when you look at information from the Mayo Clinic, when you look at young people, it can cause strokes, seizure, and also it can increase the risk of developing Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. From the heart, they have found already that taking imaging tests after recovering from COVID-19 shown lasting damages to the heart muscle, even in people who experience only mild COVID-19 symptoms. And this could potentially increase the risk of heart failure or of other heart complications in the future. And not to mention, I think what everybody understands is the common symptoms at this point and the impact on lungs. Is this all really worth, and I ask you, board, is it really worth sending our kids back for 4 touch points and not letting this try to ride itself out a little bit and continue into the holiday break before we implement this plan?
Mr. Owens, I thank you for your comments.
I thank you for the time.
At this time, we don't have any other hands up in the waiting room, so we'll move on the agenda to the consent agenda. Item number 3 on the consent agenda, or is the consent agenda, the suggested motion is for the Board of Education to approve the consent agenda as recommended. I will entertain a motion.
Support.
Something like a motion by Harris, supported by
Barry.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you, Laura. Motion by Harris, supported by Barry. Any discussion? Hearing none, I will take a roll call vote. Mrs. Pimer?
Yes.
Mrs. Burton-Kelsey?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mrs. Paget?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer-Perry?
Yes.
And Mrs. Berry?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Next on the agenda are our personnel recommendations. The following recommendations have been reviewed by the Human Resources Committee of the Board. We have personnel recommendations in several areas this evening, in the areas of administrative staff, professional staff, support staff, and Schedule B. We have one administrative recommendation for consideration this evening. The suggested motion is that the Board of Education approve the following as recommended. Roger Gerganis, Patrick Henry Middle School Principal, effective December 9th, 2020. I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Barry, supported by Harris. Any discussion?
I just think I'd like to say that our family's been lucky enough to follow Mr. G from 3rd grade through BMS and now into Patrick Henry. I think this is a great choice. He's an excellent administrator.
No further discussion. I will now take a roll call vote. Mrs. Pimer,
Yes.
Mrs. Burton Kelsey,
Absolutely, yes.
Mr. Harris, Mr. Harris,
Yes.
thank you. Mrs. Paget,
Yes.
Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer Perry,
Yes.
and Mrs. Berry.
Yes.
Thank you very much. That motion carries. Congratulations, Mr. Gerganis. We as a school district are very fortunate to have you, not only as an educator, but a leader here within the school district. We congratulate you. We look forward to having the opportunity to congratulating you in person in the very near future. So thank you for all that you've done. Thank you for all that you will be doing going forward, Mr. Gerganis.
Congratulations.
Yes. Next up, we have professional staff recommendation this evening. We have just one. The suggested motion is that the Board of Education approve the following as recommended, and that is Elise Beach, Special Services Speech and Language Pathologist, effective December 9th, 2020. With that motion, I will now entertain a motion.
So moved. Support.
Motion by Burke, supported by Harris. Any discussion? Hearing none, I will now take a roll call vote. Mrs. Pimer,
Yes.
Mrs. Burton Kelsey,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mrs. Paget,
Yep.
Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer Perry,
Yes.
and Mrs. Berry.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Congratulations, Elise. Mr. Roberts, if you could you just give us a little bit of an introduction there for Elise?
Yeah, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, good. Elise Beach is completing her master's in speech and language pathologist from Grand Valley State University. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe her graduation is this weekend coming up. She earned her bachelor's from Michigan State University and in communication sciences, disorders, and health promotions. And she completed her clinical internships with Hazel Park Public School and the pediatrics.
Well, thank you, Mr. Roberts, and Elise, congratulations and welcome aboard. Again, I know the full Board of Education looks forward to having the opportunity to meet you formally and in person in the near future.
Congratulations.
Welcome.
Go green.
All right. We have one support staff recommendation this evening. The suggested motion is that the Board of Education approve the following as recommended, and that is for Christina Smith, Waginka Elementary School Student Advocate, effective December 9th, 2020. I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Harris, supported by Burton Kelsey. Any discussion? Hearing none, I will take a roll call vote. Mrs. Pimer,
Yes.
Mrs. Burton Kelsey,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mrs. Paget,
Yes.
Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer Perry,
Yes.
and Mrs. Berry.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. Motion carries. Congratulations, Christina. Mr. Roberts, could you please do a quick introduction?
Yes. Mrs. Smith earned her bachelor's degree in science in business administration and Bible studies from Welsh College. She's worked the past 4 years with American World Adoption Agency as an administrative assistant. And she's also been subbing as a student advocate in Waginka, as well as working at Yake where her children go. So full disclosure, she's also the spouse of our finance director, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. And finally, we have 3 Schedule B recommendations this evening. The suggested motion is that the Board of Education approve the following and as recommended. Cara Pimer, boys 9th grade basketball assistant coach, effective December 9th, 2020. Jeremiah Brandt, boys varsity wrestling head coach, effective December 9th, 2020. And Elliot Gotts, boys JV baseball head coach, effective December 9th, 2020. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Harris, supported by Burton Kelsey. Any discussion? Hearing none, I will now take a roll call vote. Mrs. Pimer,
Yes.
Mrs. Burton Kelsey,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mrs. Paget,
Yes.
Mr. Burke.
Yes, hope they get their season in.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Mrs. Bauer Perry,
I have to abstain from voting due to one of the individuals as a family member.
thank you very much, Mrs. Bauer Perry, and Mrs. Berry.
Yes.
That motion carries. Congratulations to those coaches and welcome aboard. Okay. Moving on to item number 5, the Woodhaven Brownstown School District Continuity of Learning Plan. This is our reaffirmation meeting. Meeting is to reaffirm, which is to be done once per month. On Sunday, November 15th, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services halted face-to-face instruction for all 9th through 12th grade students in Michigan schools as part of a 3-week pause. On Monday, November 16th, the Woodhaven Brownstown School District additionally halted all face-to-face instruction for students in grades K through 8. Face-to-face instruction is set to resume on December 9th, with face-to-face instruction set to resume on December 9th. Then on Friday, November 20th, the Wayne County Health Department strongly recommended that all K through 12 in-person education be done remotely through January 15th. On Wednesday of last week, I held a meeting specifically regarding the Woodhaven Brownstown School District and with the Wayne County Health Department regarding in-person instruction and what steps the Woodhaven Brownstown School District would need to support in-person education. The Health Department identified social distancing as the primary mitigating factor that needed to be in place. The every other day model allows for a reduced number of students in the building to promote that social distancing. The Health Department also identified more stringent health screening protocols as an identified practice they would like to see. These two practices are being implemented by the Woodhaven Brownstown School District and are supported by the Wayne County Health Department. On Friday, December 11th, the Woodhaven Brownstown School District communicated an every other day instructional model starting December 9th for those that opted for in-person instruction with full in-person return on January 19th. And that applies.
I lost audio.
Sorry, Mr. Burke, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. On Friday, December 11th, the Woodhaven Brownstown School District communicated an every other day instructional model starting December 9th for those that opted for in-person instruction with a full in-person return scheduled for January 19th. That applies for grades young 5s through grade 8. Because for high school on Sunday, November 15th, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services halted all face-to-face instruction for students in grades 9 through 12. On Monday, December 7th, the Department of Health and Human Services extended that remote pause an additional 12 days through December 20th. As such, students in grades 9 through 12 will continue in the remote learning model through December 18th with the expectation that they will return to a hybrid model on January 4th and a full face-to-face model of instruction on January 19th. Additionally, as a review of our two-way interaction rates for the week of November 11th through November 17th, we were at 98.74%. November 18th through November 24th, we were at 98.4%. From November 25th through December 1st, we were at 99.78%. At this time, are there any questions or concerns from the Board of Education regarding the Woodhaven Brownstown School District's extended continuity of learning plan?
I don't have any, oh, I'm sorry. I don't have any questions, and I know we're not technically voting, but I'd just like it to be noted on the record that I'm opposed to our current plan.
Wouldn't it be a little more reasonable to have visual learning until after the Christmas break and then see how things are? Or the winter break, whatever you want to call it.
Are you, I'm sorry, Mr. Burke, are you referring, is the question?
Yes, instead of having a hybrid, wouldn't it be more reasonable to go from now until what would be after the winter or Christmas break, visual learning, and then see what's going on in the state?
Okay, I understand now. The thinking and the thought process, Mr. Burke, is that for those that chose in-person instruction, we wanted to work with the health department to find everything we could do to safely offer that in-person instruction. And that's why I presented and talked with the board regarding that type of model. I understand that our teachers have done a fantastic job. I could not be prouder of the job our teachers have done as they transition from those that have been remote all school year and those that have been in person this school year and then transitioned within the last 3 weeks to a remote model. I could not be prouder of the work that they have been doing in those models. The decision, and this is a short-term decision, to bring students back, even in a hybrid model, was done out of a belief that we valued the in-person opportunities. And that's why we made the decision to do what we could do with the support of the health department. And that was the key there, Mr. Burke, was with the support of the health department.
I agree that in-person learning is superior to visual learning, but at the same time, the numbers are just increasing right now, and with the past Thanksgiving holiday and the upcoming Christmas, Hanukkah holidays, I can also see an increase in having to just turn all of a sudden and go to all visual. But I'm not despairing, anyone's work ethic in trying to give our students the best education.
Are there any other questions or comments from members of the Board of Education? Okay, hearing none, then I will take that as an affirmation of the continuity of learning plan. We'll go on to item number 6 on the agenda. Under new business, we have a technology device purchase recommendation. This recommendation is to purchase 500 additional Chromebooks along with the pertinent management system to add to our supply of Chromebooks within the school district that each and every one of our students are using on a daily basis. We are using REMC quote pricing, which meets the bid requirement process for Michigan. The total for devices and management licenses is $110,245 to be funded out of the Corona Relief Fund. The suggested motion is that the Board of Education approve the recommendation to purchase 500 Chromebooks and management license in an amount not to exceed $110,245. I'll entertain a motion.
So move.
Or
Motion by Burke, supported by Harris. Any discussion?
We talked about this in our technology curriculum subcommittee meeting today, and I asked a number of questions. Josh, are you going to talk at all about the number of Chromebooks we currently have and the life expectancy of those so the board understands part of the reason for why we would want to purchase an additional 500?
Sure. Currently, we have 2,000 end-of-life Chromebooks that would be considered end-of-life in September of 2021. And they're considered end-of-life because the operating system would no longer be supported by our state assessment, MSTEP. and other assessments that require more up-to-date operating systems. So with those 2,000 end-of-life Chromebooks on hand, this 500 would make a dent into it, and the previous 1,000 Chromebooks approved by the board in the fall would also add to that. So these Chromebooks would total 1,500 of new Chromebooks going toward the 2,000 end-of-life Chromebooks, and they would be ready for fall 2021 when the purchase arrives. It's about 4 months out.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please I'm sorry. I will take a roll call vote. My apologies. Mrs. Pimer,
Yes.
Mrs. Burton Kelsey,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mrs. Paget,
Yes.
Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer Perry,
Yes.
Mrs. Berry.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the May 2021 bond application. On November 17th, at a committee of the whole meeting, the Board of Education was presented with an overview of a potential May 2021 bond ballot proposal that would be designed to meet the infrastructure, technology, transportation, and other facility needs for the next 10 years for the school district as identified in our long-term facilities assessment through Plant Moran. On December 2nd, myself, along with Mr. Belcher, Mr. Smith, representatives from Plant Moran Cressa, and our bond counsel attended a teleconference with the Department of Treasury regarding our preliminary bond application. In that meeting, Treasury provided minor feedback, which has been incorporated into our overall bond application. We are now at the next important step in the process, which is that the Board of Education approves the finalized Treasury bond application. Based again on our initial meeting with Treasury, approval is anticipated, and the Board of Education will next be asked at the January 26th board meeting to approve a recommendation to place the proposal on the ballot on May 4th. Therefore, the suggested motion is that the Board of Education approve the bond application for presentation to State Treasury as recommended. I'll entertain a motion.
So move.
Support.
Motion by Burke. I didn't catch the initial support.
Barry.
Thank you. Motion by Burke, supported by Berry. Any discussion? Hearing none, I will take a roll call vote. Mrs. Pimer,
Yes.
Mrs. Burton Kelsey,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mrs. Paget,
Yes.
Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer Perry,
Yes.
and Mrs. Berry.
Yes.
Thank you very much. That motion carries. Next item on the agenda is the 2020-21 budget amendment number 1, and the adoption of the resolution, which will be presented by Finance Director Josh Smith. At this time, I will turn it over to Mr. Smith to present the first budget amendment for the 2021 school year.
Is everyone able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Good evening. In June of each year, the Board of Education is required to adopt a preliminary budget. The budget is created using forecasted numbers, primarily because we do not know what our enrollment is going to look like in the fall, nor do we know how much the per pupil allocation is going to be from the state aid fund. The state fiscal year begins on October 1st, which means somewhere in September, we typically learn
I think Josh is muted now.
Lost audio.
There you go.
Can you hear me now? Okay, perfect. I don't know. I'll just pick up where I left off. Since this year had so many variables, I thought it would be very beneficial for us to do a little bit of an early amendment on our general fund to get a clearer picture of where we stand financially. Now that we kind of know what our per pupil allocation is going to be, it helps to remove one of those larger variables from our budget forecast. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the amended revenues. You can see that what I've highlighted, I'm sorry, let me go up. You can see that the majority of our funding, which is about 73%, comes from state aid. Other sources include federal funds, or also we refer to as grants, and our local operating millage. Currently, we're levying 18 mills for operating funds, 7 mills for debt funds, and 0.9778 mills for the sinking fund. In the following slides, you'll see that I've highlighted certain rows, and that is just to kind of show where the larger deviations are in from our adopted budget that we did in June. So grants, which are our federal funds, are up 69.2%. And this is all due to the coronavirus relief funds that we received. They were appropriated to our district after July 1st. We received some in July and some more in August. To date, we've received right around $2.6 million in COVID grants. It's important to note that federal grant funds are restricted funds and cannot be expended like we do our general fund monies. Using these funds, we've paid for PPE for this year and the increased expenditures for contracted services due to the enhanced cleaning protocols, which has allowed us to reduce our overall impact to the general fund. I'd also like to note the increase of around 11% in state revenues. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but we budgeted in June for a decrease in state aid to the tune of $450 per student, as well as a decrease in enrollment of about 50 students. So now that we know the state has allocated or done a flat carryover from last school year to this school year, so that amount is coming in quite a bit higher than what we had budgeted in June, which is great news. Our accounting software allows us to break down our expenditures by function as well as by object. So function codes would be kind of like departmental codes. It breaks them down by department. In this pie chart, you can see the instruction and instructional support, the two largest pieces of the pie, total around 75%. That is the current amount of our budget that's allocated to instruction. Now, normally, and this is true as of our audited financial statements from June 30 that were presented to us last month, that number is usually around 85%. So one thing to bear in mind is this year is quite an anomaly. We spoke earlier about the increase in federal funds or grant funds, which are restricted. So for every dollar that comes in revenue, we're required to spend that same dollar. So the revenues go up, but on the flip side of that, the expenditures go up as well. So because of that, we're spending more money on PPE, more money on operations that we do in a normal year. So it's going to kind of skew our percentages of our budget allocations. The amended expenditures here, you can see 59% increase in operations and maintenance, which is directly tied to COVID expenditures for enhanced cleaning. The majority of this increase will be funded by the Coronavirus Relief Fund grant monies. Also, if you notice that other line there, that's increase of 3,400% earmarked as other. In 2017, the district decided to start earmarking or committing $400,000 for technology, $200,000 for bus replacement, and $5,000 for band uniforms. These earmarks can be reflected on page 17 of our audited financial statements, and they've remained in our general fund over the last 4 years. So what I did was I created a new capital projects fund to make accounting for these committed funds a little bit easier. So 4 years worth of that 605,000 is 4.2 million. I'm sorry, I said that in reverse, 2.4 million, which was transferred to the new capital projects fund. These funds are no longer accounted for in our general fund, but they remain unrestricted, which is different than bond funds. So they can be used, but just accounting for them separately in this capital projects fund. Next, we're going to look at our expenditures by object code. Here we can see that 75% of our total expenses, our total budget, are being used for salaries and benefits. The 12% for purchase services would include any kind of sub costs or other contracted service that we have in the district. And some of these costs, along with that materials and supplies portion of the budget, are being paid for by COVID funds as well. In this comparison, you'll see the increase of the $2.4 million in that other line item. That is the interdepartmental transfer to the new capital project fund. And the increase in supplies and materials would include the PPE and cleaning supplies that our director of contract services is using. That's also being paid for by COVID funds. And in this slide, this shows a comparison of our major budgetary changes or impacts that happened between June from the preliminary approval of the budget to November. In June, we budgeted for enrollment of 5,425 students. In this amendment, I used 5,553. This number is from a desk audit from our pupil accountant. Our fall 2020 count was certified in November the 20th. So this number could change once we get the December state aid notice on December the 20th. Also in June, we budgeted for a decrease in state aid, like I mentioned earlier, of $450 per pupil. So we budgeted for $7,735. But now we know that the per pupil allocation did not decrease. So it's just carried over from 2019 school year. So it remained at $8,185 per pupil. We have also realized an increase in our grant revenues of $3.6 million. All of these are restricted funds that are coming in from the federal government for COVID relief. You can also see about $700,000 increase in operations and maintenance and $350,000 in transportation. This is also for the enhanced cleaning, in addition to our annual contracts that we have with ABM and Trinity. And then finally, there again, you'll see the $2.4 million for technology, band uniforms, and buses earmarked as an internal transfer. And then finally, I'd just like to talk about the fund balance. So in June of 2020, we were looking at a fund balance of $11.2 million. This was prior to the audit. We were carried over our expenditures, did a carryover budget, but reducing those revenues. We planned on using $4.8 million of our fund balance, which was going to give us an ending fund balance of $6.4 million, which is 10.6%. Our audited numbers ended up coming in at 23% as of June 30th. So that was quite a reduction in our fund balance. However, we know now that the audited fund balance at the end of June 30 was almost $13.4 million. The decrease or the utilization of our fund balance for this fiscal year, we're projecting $3.2 million. But I do want to note, of that $3.2 million, $2.4 million of that is the internal transfer to the unrestricted capital project fund. So the real number that we would be using out of our fund balance is around $886,000. And that's going to give us a projected fund balance June 30, 2021 of $10.1 million or 15%. That is all I have. So do you have any questions that I can answer for you?
I had a couple notes while you were going through it.
Yeah.
One, when you look at the fund balance, one of the biggest differences is that we kind of projected doom and gloom because we didn't know what our federal funding was.
Correct.
So that large increase from amended to original budget is due to our doom and gloom, correct?
Correct. Yep. We kind of budgeted for worst case scenario. And we didn't know what kind of monies we'd be getting from the federal government nor from the state. So it came out working pretty good for us.
All right. Other point was the amount left in the federal Corona grants. Do we have who's following that and who's responsible to make sure we spend it all?
So Stacy Vespremi, actually all of Central Office kind of has our arms around it, but Stacy, Mike, and myself I have been meeting pretty regularly about this. I can tell you that it's comprised of 3 different grants. The first grant that came in July was around $68,000, and that money was expended almost immediately on PPE, just preparing for the beginning of the school year. The next grant we have until December 31st to spend down. It was $1.9 million, and we are on track to spend that down. We were able to shift some costs out of the general fund, some expenditures out of the general fund for enhanced cleaning. There was just a handful of things that we could move out technology purchases that we had to do due to remote learners. And so we are on track to have that spent by the December 31st deadline. And then there's another grant for about 500, that's the ESSER funds, about $585,000 that we have until September 31st to spend down. And we are actually on track to use those funds since we had a little bit more of a timeline. We're planning on using those for PPE and cleaning chemicals for second semester.
Where are we sitting on? I mean, I guess it's more of a Mike question when you bring up PPE, but just wondering how we're sitting on PPE right now.
Can you hear me, Rob?
Yeah.
We have a nice stash of PPE. We just placed another order to get us, we're maintaining an inventory that we think is about a rolling 2.5 to 3 month average. So that's where we're sitting.
All right. That's kind of what I wondered, like how far out we were with it.
Yep.
The only other question I had, Josh, is just not today, but if we could get an update on the food service account.
I'm sorry, on what?
On the food service account. Just if it could be in a board report, that's fine.
For sure.
Thank you. That's it.
You just want to know like balances and plans?
Yeah, because I meant that was some discussion a while back. Again, a facility, more operation meeting and finance about that. Also money that was in there that needs to be spent on equipment and dated.
Mr. Harris, we're working through that, and that will be at our next facility operation committee as well.
All right, thanks, Mike.
Josh, I have a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other grants that you know of that if we were needing to get more COVID-related PE or needed more funding for that, is there anything left for us to go for, or have we taken advantage of everything that's out there?
So far, Laura, I would have to say that we have taken advantage of everything that's out there to date. There are always on the listservs, the groups that I belong to for the MSBO and the WCSBO, ideas that are being thrown around. And there's also, trying to keep the pulse on, what's going on federally or nationally, because there could be some more grants that are awarded federally come January, February. So I'm definitely keeping the temperature on that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just have a question to clarify. I imagine some of the expenses in the operations and maintenance are largely due to the increased cleaning, the monthly expense that we have. And I just want to confirm that cleaning expenditures could come out of COVID grants, correct?
They have, yep.
They have. Okay.
Yeah, so that's why you see that huge increase in maintenance and operations for cleaning. It's offset by the grant codes the grants that are coming in the revenue. So for every dollar that we get in COVID grants, we increase the dollar of expenditures on the other side.
Hello? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Smith?
No, I just want to thank him for bringing it forward. We saw this in a finance committee meeting, and I think it's pretty well put together and high level enough to talk to, but we have some details in our board packet. So thanks for walking us through it.
Thank you.
I was going to say the same thing. Finance is not my strength. And whenever I see a presentation similar to what you just did, and I can understand it, it's valuable to me as a non-finance person to feel comfortable that you've got your hands around everything. So I echo that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Mr. Smith. The suggested motion is that the Board of Education approve the First Amendment to the 2020-21 school year budget and adopt the supporting resolution as recommended. We'll entertain a motion.
Moved. Support.
Motion by Burton Kelsey, supported by Pimer. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, I will take a roll call vote. Mrs. Pimer?
Yes.
Mrs. Burton Kelsey?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mrs. Paget,
Yes.
Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer Perry, and Mrs. Berry.
Yes.
Thank you very much. That motion carries. Item number 7 is reports. Under superintendent's report, we have accepted resignations from Abby DeSena as a speech and language pathologist and Nicole Richmond as a special services administrative assistant. We wish them both well on their future endeavors. I'd like to just reiterate my sincere gratitude, thanks, and utmost pride to the educators within the Woodhaven Brownstown School District for the work that they've done over the last 3 weeks, but also what has been a somewhat up and down the last couple of weeks. You've made me extremely proud. I could not be happier with the work that you're doing and the education that you're providing our students. I do understand from the communications that I've received the concerns going to a hybrid model and versus maintaining the daily remote instruction. As indicated here, that was done with an eye towards an intent of providing those in-person options that we've had throughout the school year to the greatest extent that we could, understanding that over the next little more than 3 weeks, it won't be day to day, but is attempting to be done in such a way as to provide continuity and the quality that comes with in-person instruction. Wish everybody a safe and happy holiday season coming up here. Item number 8 is hearing of the public for items that were not listed on this evening's agenda. Again, these are for items that were not listed on this evening's agenda. Comments should be limited to 5 minutes, please. If you would like to comment, please do so by raising your hand in Zoom. Okay, Nick, we will get you unmuted there. If you could state your first and last name and address, and then please commence with your comment.
Hi, so my name is Donna Hargett. My son is Nicholas Hargett, and he is an 8th grade at public middle school. I sent an email, Mr. Greathead, to you earlier this morning. I guess my question is, how do you guys determine, I know you're going based off of the health department's decision, but how do you determine that 9th through 12th grade should stay home and K through 8 should be in school, where they are just as high of risk at getting COVID as the 12th graders?
Mrs. Hargett, thank you for your question. I can only tell you that the school district did not make the decision regarding 9th through 12th grade. That was a decision made by the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. In that same decision that they made, they indicated that local school districts should work with their local health departments regarding K through 8 instruction.
So with the COVID cases going up in Wayne County, how do you feel that it is in the best interest of the kids to send them to school? Technically, out of 8 days, they're only going 4 days. They're at least remote. They are on Zoom classes every single day, all day long with their teachers.
Certainly can understand and appreciate that perspective. The decision to bring them back in person was done with the experts at the Wayne County Health Department, and that's who we have to rely on to assist us and give us some guidance in making that decision.
And you had 2 board members that disagree with the kids going back to school. I believe Mr. Burke and Ms. Palmer said that they disagree with sending K through 8 to school. Were there any other board members that disagreed?
There weren't any that voiced that at the time.
Just a quick, if I might just interrupt for a second, board member. I support the option and the opportunity for our kids to return face-to-face in conjunction with trying to do the best we can with social distancing. And I do understand the concerns, and I have offered prior in public meetings to give my cell phone number, because dialogue for me is easier when it's one-on-one. And I'm going to ask Mrs. Hebert to please put my cell phone number on the WBSD website. So any of you that are currently on this call that have questions or concerns about how I interpret what we're doing, I am 100% open to a conversation. It's very difficult for me to respond in this scenario. There's 7 of us. We each have input into these decisions, but I will have my cell phone number out there tomorrow, and I am 100% open. Please send me a text first so that I know it's someone from our district, because as you all do, we get a lot of crank calls, not we being board members, all of us as people, and I want to be able to respond. So I'd like to say that. Secondly, I'd like to say that we had an outstanding subcommittee meeting today, and I just want to thank once more Stacy and Matt Salah and Josh Satterfield for all the information they provided, and I'm anticipating that it'll be in one of our superintendent reports in the future. Thanks, guys.
So thank you. My only concern is I have my elderly father here with me currently, who had surgery a couple months ago, and he's been living with me ever since. He's 82. He do some cancer treatment. My biggest worry is that, you know, Nick comes home and he's asymptomatic. We don't know that he has it, and my dad gets it. So it just concerns me until he is able to get back to normal and be able to live in his own house. You know, at that time, I have to be concerned about, you know, his well-being as well. So I just thought that with it being so close to the holiday, and with you guys making the decision, even the first go around where the health department said 9th through 12th grade, that you guys made the decision for it to be kindergarten through 12th grade, that kind of the same scenario would take place since we were so close to the Christmas holiday. That keep the kids home, keep them safe, keep them healthy. Let's start fresh in January when, you know, hopefully the numbers start coming down, or, you know, they keep rising, is my concern.
Mrs. Hargett, I will either myself directly or your building principal, we will connect with you tomorrow, and we will find, we've done this with a number of people that have reached out to us, to find the short-term solution that works best for you and your family.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Dawn, you have your hand up.
Yeah, hi there. My name is Dawn. I have Zoe and Connor. They go to Waganka. We are out of district. We're in Taylor on Morton View, 11700 Morton View. I have two concerns. One, well, actually just one. For the next, say January after the holiday, like we did in the beginning, we surveyed the parents. What do you want? I think the parents that going to school, their kids are face-to-face, a lot of their ideas have changed. I think some of them still think it's dangerous to send their kids back, and they weren't really surveyed this time around. Maybe think about that for the next return after the holiday, where the numbers are, see what it looks like. Okay, parents, how do you feel about sending them back in January? Is that something that you guys would consider?
That is something we will consider. I appreciate the suggestion and the comment. And it will be something that we consider.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Okay. All right. That concludes the hearing of the public. We'll now open it up for board member comments.
I have a couple things. One, I just want to echo Ms. Burton's comments around, conversations. My email is out there and my phone number is out there, and I welcome comments and conversations. And for those that have done that, I appreciate that. And I also want to let everyone know that this Thursday is our virtual PAC meeting. So the Wayne County Parent Advisory Committee will meet at 6:30. And we are having a conversation on emergency preparedness, specifically for people with disabilities and their families. So that meeting again is this Thursday, December 10th at 6:30. Thank you.
I had a comment.
You muted, Rob.
Lost you, Mr. Harris.
There you go.
Sorry. Okay. Just had a couple comments. One is for the election of officers. I'll be sending out an email next week to survey the board. If you could remember just to reply just to me, not to the complete board. But it should, I think I have it slated to go out on the 15th of next week. The other thing I'd like to see if Josh, Mr. Satterfield could follow up, just looking to see and maybe a running total if the board could be updated every so often on what it would take to put a Chromebook in every student's hand, K through 12. So not a question I expect to be answered now, but where we are and then the life also of those once we get them into a student's hand. That's it.
I have a question.
Yes, sir. We can hear you, Mr. Burke.
Oh, okay. Looking at
I'm sorry, we lost you, Mr. Burke. Did you mute? Mr. Burke, we lost you. Did you mute yourself?
things they've had to endure in this trying times.
Mr. Burke, we only caught the very tail end of what you were saying. Would you mind repeating it? I'm sorry.
Yes. Because of the strong financial report, I'd like to know if there's anything, a small or modest payment we can make to all our employees for all they've had to endure this school year with what's going on and what's going to happen. Like a small Christmas one-time payout.
Okay. Something we will look at, Mr. Burke, and we'll get back to the board. Thank you.
And just, not that I think it's a bad idea, or I know that we've already done one piece, but Mr. Burke, just to know that that huge increase, again, like I stated, or brought up to Josh, it's only because of our, we showed, at least a $5 million, loss to our fund balance at the beginning of the year, not knowing our funding from the federal government. So that influx is really, if you look back, what we were looking at prior to the school year, it's not that far off. It's not that much of an increase.
Well, I understand that, but still it's a strong financial statement, and our employees have worked hard. That's all I'm saying. Whether it's viable or not is a different question altogether.
Thank you. Any other board member comments? Seeing none, then we will adjourn the meeting at 6:35 p.m. Thank you very much.
Thank you.